Funerals come up as one of the most common Centrelink shelter strategies to reduce assessable assets. And there's basically two ways this can happen. There's prepaid funerals that I might talk about later if we have time, and there's funeral bonds. Now, funeral bonds are a financial product that allows you to basically put money away in a Centrelink black hole, where at the moment the cap is $15,000 as of August 2024 that you can put into a funeral bond, and it functions like a normal financial product, a little bit like a superannuation fund. So what basically happens is that each person can put $15,000 into this bond, and just like your super fund, if you go look at your super statements, you can go choose your investment options, whether that's cash, growth, high growth, whatever you decide to choose. And effectively what happens is that, let's say $15,000 will grow at whatever those investments grow at. They're internally taxed at 30%, any income dividends received along the way. And upon the person passing away, when those funds are received, there's no capital gains tax payable. And so let's go into what actually happens to the funds. Now, firstly, you can't access them until the person passes away. That is a requirement of the funeral bonds. But one of the most common things that I hear from families when it comes to funeral bonds is, well, I wasn't going to spend $15,000. And here's the thing, if someone keeps it for a number of years, and we've had some of these in place for over 5-10 years, then that might be double, triple, might be worth $45,000. And I hear a lot of families say, well, we weren't going to spend $15,000 or whatever it is on the funeral, and they might have other wishes. And I hear all sorts of things that we actually don't want a funeral. Their wishes were that we scatter their ashes all over a beach or the sea somewhere. And what happens in those cases? So what I see in most cases is that funeral bonds, typically, at least the ones we use, have got two options. First option is that you can nominate that the funds, whatever they are at the time, go straight to a funeral director, and you can be very specific about who they go to. That's less common. What we usually recommend is that the funds actually go straight into the estate. Lost my camera. Go straight into the estate and be treated along with the will's wishes. So basically what that means is that it doesn't really matter if you want to spend, and this happened a lot during COVID where we didn't have those elaborate funerals. They were done over Zoom and they cost far less. So whether it's a $500 funeral or whether it's this big fancy affair that costs tens of thousands of dollars, let's just say it's worth $30,000 at the time of passing, then $30,000 would go into the estate along with the bank accounts, along with the bond, like refundable accommodation deposits, maybe along with the house if it's the individually held home, everything else, and whatever the will says, if it goes equally among the 2-3 children, that's what's going to happen. So when it comes to these funeral bonds, just because we put $15,000 in does not mean you have to spend that $15,000 on a funeral. And I often tell families to just think twice about nominating a particular funeral director, because then it locks you in that little bit more, and potentially you've got the risks of how they manage their finances, everything else, and flexibility is key. Now, especially, and when it comes to the more practical element of funding funerals, typically, and having worked at ANZ Bank, what banks will typically do is, even if the person has passed away, if you provide them with the invoice for the funeral by the funeral director, then they'll typically cover those expenses with no issue. So as long as you have sufficient liquidity, which what I would say is, if you don't have that liquidity and funds available, or you think you might not, then a funeral bond might not be the right option for you, given its complete lack of liquidity. So just things to keep in mind about taking out funeral bonds, but the main benefit is that we can lock away that $15,000 to begin with, which can already put us under certain thresholds, get more pension, reduce means-tested care fees, and it'll allow that money to grow without impacting means-tested payments like the ones I spoke about. And so those are the main benefits and practical use of a funeral bond.